I'm Wycor, a board member here at Common Cause Georgia. You may have heard that our slogan at Common Cause Georgia is holding power accountable. And that's what we do. We work hard to hold government officials and politicians accountable to the people of this great state. Let's take a look at our program of work in that direction over the past year, because we hope that if you're not a member of our organization, that you will become one, and that if you are an existing member, that you will redouble your efforts to help us in achieving our goals. You may have heard the old saying that politicians live in a bubble. This year, we once again found that old political adage to be true down at the state capitol. There's a real disconnect between the people who lead this state and those who elected them. When measuring our state's ethics laws, a well-respected national organization gave Georgia an F on its corruption potential report card and ranked us dead last in the nation, the worst ethics laws in the country. Instead of responding with tough ethics legislation, House leaders defended the status quo, and one even went so far as to say that we're at the top of the list for strong ethics laws, not the bottom. Here's House Ethics Committee Chairman Joe Wilkinson at a legislative briefing in early January. Wilkinson said Georgians want ethics reform only because they want to feel better. Living in the bubble, Wilkinson went on to tell the crowd that he had conducted his own study and found that Georgia actually ranks number 3 in the nation, not 50. When asked to produce his report, Wilkinson replied, quote, "It's mine. It's a working document," and refused to release it, and he never did. And the bubble floats on. Just after the July primaries, when 82% of Georgia's voters asked their state legislature to limit gifts from lobbyists, House Speaker David Ralston, whose previous position was that Georgia's ethics laws were just fine, reversed his position by promising he would sponsor legislation giving Georgia, quote, "a complete ban on lobbyist gifts." But when his bill was introduced, we learned that only in a bubble could a, quote, "complete ban" still allow unlimited gift giving by lobbyists who buy dinners and beverages for groups of legislators such as committees, subcommittees, or local delegations. Under the plan, lobbyists could still fund trips to luxury resorts for individual legislators and their family members as long as the purpose of the trip relates to undefined official duties. And our bubble floats even deeper into the legislative session.
Well, when the Speaker first started talking about an ethics bill that would ban lobbyist gifts, we got really excited. But as usual, we knew the devil would be in the details. And when the bill came out, the devil was there. There were a lot of loopholes in the bill. But really, after examining it, we realized that if we took the bill and we closed the loopholes, it would actually be a decent piece of legislation. So we sat down, we came up with an amendment of each area where there was a loophole, and we sent those to the members of the General Assembly. I was shocked by the response I got from the majority leader of the House of Representatives.
Thank you for your incredibly sagacious suggestions. Whoever's paying you off is sure getting their money's worth.
With that sort of attitude, it's no wonder we ended up with a bill with a $75 cap so chock full of loopholes that there's unlimited spending that still remains. They say we should be happy with what we got, but what the governor signed into law is nowhere near what the voters asked for last July.
In addition to ethics reform, Common Cause Georgia has tackled another issue where a huge gap exists between what most Georgians want for their government and what the politicians are actually doing. The public funding of the proposed new billion-dollar stadium for the Atlanta Falcons. While it started the year as a legislative issue, things quickly changed as Common Cause Georgia focused the spotlight on this important issue.
Well, the governor surprised everyone on the stadium issue because essentially he passed the hot potato from the legislature over to the city council. And I guess it shouldn't be too big of a surprise because 75% of Georgians didn't support the project. So the governor and the legislature were able to dodge the bullet. They were able to avoid having to make the tough choice of alienating Arthur Blank and the Falcons or ignoring the will of the voters. And it really is disappointing because they didn't do the job that we send them there to do. We want them to make the tough decisions, and instead they hid in their bubble and avoided it completely.
I have tried my best to relieve the members of the General Assembly from difficult decisions that they have to make that have political consequences, said the governor. So our bubble floated on across the street to Atlanta City Hall. With the issue now on his plate, Mayor Reed steamrolled the proposed project through the city council. Once an agreement was reached with the Falcons and an actual plan was released, everyone, including the council and the public, had only 2 business days to vet the proposal. With a rarely used parliamentary trick, the billion-dollar plan was rammed through the council, voted on the same day it was introduced, completely bypassing the committee process. It passed by a vote of 11-4, despite the fact that the mayor's own poll showed at least 64% of Atlantans do not support public funding of the stadium. While the public was repeatedly told about a generous deal where public funds would only be used for $200 million in construction costs, with $800 million funded by the Falcons, we found some different numbers. In an internal document we received through an open records request to the Georgia World Congress Center, we found that the public's projected contribution through the hotel-motel tax is actually over $882 million. Now, the City of Atlanta CFO projected a different number, so we will add his number for argument's sake, $494 million. Throw in the additional public investments of $50 million for sales tax credits, $24 million in state land, $15 million for community development, and that's either $971 million by the state's numbers or $583 million by the city's numbers. Either way, it's much more than the $200 million they've been selling us. The bubble presents yet another challenge. With the disconnect so great, politicians seemingly can get away with it. At Common Cause Georgia, we hear from many people who say they really like what we do. But frankly, to be successful in holding power accountable, we have to have more than words of encouragement. We have to have tangible support, memberships, and frankly, money.
You know, we're a uniquely challenged group, both in membership and fundraising, and it's because we hold power accountable. So the powerful generally shun us. We're a nonpartisan group, so partisans generally shun us. And while Atlanta is home to some big, generous corporations, they have lobbyists, and lobbyists generally shun us. We aren't a feel-good entity. You know, we're not solving homelessness or hunger. We're not curing cancer. We work in the trenches of government. It is dirty work, and our progress is measured in inches, not miles.
To be an effective watchdog, one must maintain one's own independence. Now, when you do that, you naturally deny yourself some of the close political ties that others, both for-profit organizations and nonprofit, enjoy. Nonetheless, Common Cause Georgia is doing great work at the Capitol. We can do even more with greater resources, and we do have our supporters at both the Capitol and City Hall. Those who are working for good government know the good that Common Cause Georgia is doing.
I do think that Common Cause provides a great service, because too often folks down who get elected and spend all their time in running around with each other, it's hard to reconnect and see outside of that community and understand what the people want, what the people need, and to see from their elected officials. And everybody wants to be trusted, and everyone feels like they're doing the right thing most of the time. But I think that in order to really be seen, to be trustworthy, to be doing the right thing, to be an ethical, good group of people, sometimes politicians need folks like Common Cause to come and rattle the walls down there. And Common Cause has been great at doing that.
What I do want to make absolutely clear is that we would not be where we are today on this issue without the work of Common Cause. Common Cause Georgia put together the Ethics Alliance. They have kept this issue at the forefront. And frankly, without them, we simply wouldn't be where we are today. So I'm tremendously grateful for our partners, both in Common Cause Georgia and all the many other grassroots organizations that comprise the Georgia Alliance for Ethics Reform, because their work has been critical in this process.
Well, Common Cause Georgia has been a new player on the block, I would say, here at City Hall, particularly starting with the airport contracts to the stadium, and making sure that we adequately are advocating for us to adequately vet that process. And I think that it would be considered here as an agitator, but of course you have to have agitation to get the clothes clean. So it's a good thing to have that agitation and have some groups that are out there with credibility that people are listening to and hearing and saying that these things need to be done for public input, for transparency, for fairness and process. It's an extremely important thing for Common Cause Georgia to continue to do the work that it does.
All too often, we focus on the challenges that lie before us instead of stopping and thinking about the successes that we've had. And we've had some. When you think about ethics reform, in the state of Georgia, the Speaker of the House just a year ago talked about how the status quo was acceptable, that we didn't need limits on lobbyist gifts. And by the time the session rolled around, he introduced his own bill limiting lobbyist gifts. When you talk about spending by lobbyists down at the state capitol, each year during the session, they were spending close to $1 million on gifts. And we cut that by about $370,000. We're making it unacceptable to accept lobbyist gifts. We're getting there. Then when you look at the stadium, we shined such a bright light and made that issue so intense that the legislature passed it up and sent it over to the Atlanta City Council. We're making a difference, but what we need is the huge victory. And honestly, the only way we're going to get that is with more members, more money, and more people involved in our issues.
So there you have it. With a little more help from fellow Georgians, we can burst those bubbles. We can bring our government officials out of their bubbles into the sunshine and fresh air of reality. You might say we're Common Cause Georgia working toward a bubble-free Georgia. We are making a difference. Won't you help us make an even bigger difference today and tomorrow? Please support Common Cause Georgia.